What happens when history's two greatest warlords go head-to-head? The man who conquered the known world versus the man who created the largest empire in history. Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan never met. But what if they had? Who had the better army, the smarter tactics, and the raw power to dominate the battlefield? One led from the front with a 16-foot spear. The other vanished into the steppe, only to strike like lightning days later. But here's the twist. Genghis Khan studied Alexander and criticized him. So who would actually win? And why did both empires collapse after their deaths? Let's discuss it in today's episode of TRS Clips. When you strip away the battles and the empires, what made Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan truly legendary was their leadership. But make no mistake, they couldn't have been more different in how they ruled, how they fought, and how they inspired or terrified the people around them. Alexander was charismatic, almost godlike in the eyes of his men. He was tutored by Aristotle, steeped in Greek philosophy, and believed in merging cultures. He wore Persian robes in Babylon, married foreign princesses, and pushed for a unified empire that blended East and West. On the battlefield, he led from the front, literally charging into combat alongside his soldiers. At the Battle of the Granicus, he was nearly killed, but kept fighting. His troops saw him as one of their own, and that loyalty helped him conquer lands from Greece to the Indus River, 11,000 miles in all. But he could also be impulsive and paranoid. In fits of rage or drunken fury, he executed close friends and even generals like Clitus the Black, who had once saved his life. Genghis Khan, on the other hand, ruled through fear, discipline, and brutal meritocracy. Born as Temujin, he clawed his way up from exile and slavery to unite the Mongol tribes. He didn't care about bloodlines, only loyalty and results. A stable boy could become a general if he proved himself. Mongol soldiers were organized, well-fed, and even had a field postal system. But when it came to enemies, ruthless. Entire cities were burned to the ground, millions slaughtered, all to break the will of resistance. Yet to his own men, he was fair, dividing spoils equally and punishing generals who abandoned soldiers in battle. And this is reflected in their army power. Before we move on to the next section, please don't forget to subscribe if you liked the video so far. Let's talk muscle, military muscle. Behind every legendary conqueror is an army that made it all possible. So who had the real edge when it came to the battlefield? Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan? Alexander's army was a war machine built for precision. His core infantry, the Macedonian phalanx, fought in tight formations wielding sarissas, gigantic 16-foot spears that created a living wall of iron. It was almost impossible to break through. And then there was his elite companion cavalry, heavily armored shock troops led by Alexander himself, capable of crashing through enemy lines like a wrecking ball. On top of that, Alexander brought along engineers who could construct massive siege towers, battering rams, and catapults, allowing him to smash through city walls across Asia and the Middle East. In just 10 years, he conquered over 18,000 miles, from Greece all the way to India. But then you've got Genghis Khan, the storm from the east. His army wasn't built for brute force. It was a symphony of speed and strategy. Mongol warriors carried composite bows and could fire accurately while galloping at full speed, basically turning the battlefield into a shooting gallery. Each rider had a string of 3 to 5 horses, allowing them to ride non-stop for days without tiring. And if that's not enough, Genghis mastered psychological warfare. He didn't just defeat enemies, he crushed their spirits. Entire cities were wiped out to send a message: surrender or face annihilation. Over 25 years, Genghis's armies conquered more than 25,000 miles, creating the largest contiguous land empire in history. Alexander brought discipline and innovation. Genghis brought mobility and terror. Two armies, two radically different styles of war. Speaking of which, when it comes to battlefield tactics, both Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan weren't just good, they were terrifyingly brilliant. These weren't just warriors, They were chess masters playing with thousands of lives on a board that spanned continents. Let's start with Alexander. His signature move? The hammer and anvil. His phalanx, the anvil, would lock enemy forces in place, those 16-foot sarissas pressing forward like a wall of death. Then came the hammer, his elite companion cavalry slamming into the flanks at full speed. It was a textbook tactic he used to devastating effect at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE, where he defeated a Persian army that outnumbered him nearly 5-1. He also used psychological bait, feigned retreats like at Arbela to lure enemies out of position. And here's the thing. He didn't command from the rear. He led charges himself, sword in hand, in the thick of the chaos. That kind of leadership inspired total loyalty and absolute fear in his enemies. But Genghis Khan took deception to an entirely new level. At the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, he lured a Rus army over 60 miles into a trap using a false retreat. Not just a few minutes of running away like Alexander, but days of it. When the Rus forces were exhausted and scattered, the Mongols turned and annihilated them. His armies attacked in waves in what's been called a two-man avalanche, 10,000 strong units charging in fluid, shifting formations. And Genghis didn't guess his enemies' moves, he knew them. His spy networks infiltrated enemy courts, religions, and tribes. He fought battles before they even began. For all their brilliance, even the greatest conquerors had flaws. Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan both seemed unstoppable, but neither conquered the entire known world. So what held them back? Alexander's biggest strength, his personal charisma, was also his downfall. His army followed him because they loved him, not necessarily his vision. When he died suddenly in Babylon at just 32 years old, everything unraveled. He had no clear heir, no plan for who would rule after him. His generals, called the Diadochi, carved up the empire into pieces, launching decades of civil war. His dream of a unified empire from Greece to India collapsed almost overnight. And while he was busy fighting in Asia, back home in Greece, rebellions started bubbling. He had conquered fast, but he never really secured what he left behind. Genghis Khan, by contrast, ruled longer, until age 65, and built an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. But his brutal methods bred deep hatred. Cities that resisted were annihilated, sometimes tens of thousands executed in a single day. That kind of fear worked short-term, but it made long-term governance nearly impossible in some regions. His empire also became dangerously stretched. Managing territories across China, Central Asia, Persia, and Eastern Europe was a logistical nightmare. And while Genghis had a sharp military mind, he never tried to culturally unify his empire. There was no shared identity, no single religion or law code to bind it all together. Ironically, both men died at their peak. Alexander, possibly from fever or poisoning, and Genghis perhaps from a fall off his horse. But who would win if they faced each other on the battlefield? Now let's get to the fantasy showdown everyone wants. Alexander the Great versus Genghis Khan. Who wins if these two military titans actually clash? Surprisingly, Genghis Khan might have given us a hint. According to Persian manuscripts, Genghis Khan studied ancient conquerors obsessively. He learned about Alexander through Muslim scholars and respected his speed and ability to absorb local forces into his army. Genghis even adopted similar rapid march systems and recruitment strategies, but he was critical too. Alexander wasted time on cities, Genghis reportedly said, when he should have chased armies. And there's a legend that he once declared, "Alexander was an eagle, but I am the storm." So who really wins? On open terrain, Genghis dominates. His horse archers would harass and surround Alexander's phalanx before it could engage. On a narrow mountain pass, though, Alexander's disciplined formations and close-quarter tactics would shred Mongol cavalry. But if the war dragged on, Genghis would likely outlast his opponent. He had better logistics, a relay communication system, and a deep spy network. Alexander could win a battle, but Genghis was built for campaigns that crushed entire civilizations. In the end, one was a tactician, the other a strategist. Experts say Alexander wins a battle, but Genghis wins the war. And honestly, that sounds about right. Alexander was the master tactician, Genghis the supreme strategist, one inspired through leadership, the other through discipline. But who do you think was greater? Let us know in the comments below. Here's another video history buffs enjoyed watching. Bye for now.